Hello and welcome to another Liverpool.com podcast. I am Dan Morgan, and this week I'm joined by Liverpool.com staff writers Ollie Connolly and Joel Rabinowitz. Gentlemen, hope you're well. Coming to you from a very wet and gloomy day on Merseyside in the heart of Liverpool, where we're going to talk about a number of things really. Who says the international break doesn't have any content for us to talk about? It's certainly been a war of attrition for us, lads, over the last week or so to get what we cut out for the reader, but we've managed to persevere and endeavour, and we've got to the point in which domestic football, club football, is very nearly back. So we had a little chat this morning, didn't we, on our morning call, and I've decided to put this in as sort of an opening gambit. The eternal question right now that's getting asked but isn't getting asked: where on earth is Thiago Alcantara? Hopefully, Joel, nothing breaks this week that tells us that Thiago is good, bad or indifferent mid-podcast, as it did last week with Joe Gomez. But where do you think, or what do you think more prevalently is going on with Thiago Alcantara's situation at Liverpool right now?
Starting to question whether we actually signed him at all at this point, after spending all summer obsessing about him, talking about him, writing about him every single week, and then he's just disappeared off the face of the earth. No pictures, no videos. He's supposed to be doing a Q&A a couple of weeks ago, which hasn't happened. No updates about him being in training, which is supposed to have happened by now, I think. I don't know, really. It's funny, the way Klopp was speaking about it after the Everton game, when he obviously had that horrific challenge by Richarlison, he didn't really rule him out for a specific period of time. I think he almost left it open, as in he could have been involved against Ajax or Sheffield United or one of those games around then. Not definitely, but he hadn't definitively ruled him out of being back for those games. And then there was a period, I think, in late October when we saw some pictures of him doing individual training at Melwood, not as part of a team, but just sort of running by himself. And all the word, and from what you saw of Attacker, it was just an impact injury, really bad, studs up on the knee. So it seemed like bruising, nothing kind of severe in terms of ligament damage or anything like that. So it is a strange one. I kind of had assumed, I'd written a piece a couple of days ago about the midfield trio we've not seen yet this season of Thiago, Wijnaldum and Henderson being Liverpool's sort of way forward over this period. And obviously Henderson's got a bit of a muscle worry at the moment from England duty, and Thiago's nowhere to be seen. I guess we'll see more training pictures come out later this week on Thursday once all the international guys are back. So it's possible that he was just doing individual work. My kind of paranoid side is like, why are they not showing pictures of him when they're showing pictures of Oxlade-Chamberlain, who's also on the recovery trail? Yeah, it is a strange one. I've told you some of my slightly wilder theories, which I'm not going to go into on here. But until we hear anything more from the manager, it's hard to know, really.
Ollie, you made the point that he's a player who basically had his own regime at Bayern Munich and basically followed, a very individualist fitness pattern. Do we think that's the case here? I mean, we know the only argument I'm making in playing devil's advocate with that is we know sort of how much Klopp demands from training, how much he needs his players to sort of be on the same level and same level of both physical and sort of togetherness throughout the day-to-day at Melwood and what is now Kirby. So do we think it's sheerly a case that Thiago might just be following his own pattern, his own routine, and then he pops up when he's ready?
I think it's certainly a possibility. Look, as you mentioned there at Bayern, he would very much, given just the sheer volume of injuries he's had, and most modern athletes now, although they get world-class healthcare and treatment, they do still have the sense that they know their body better than anyone else. And you'll have guys like LeBron James spends $1.5 million a year away from his team on his own body and physical preparation. You have guys who will work. I mean, once you get to a certain level as an athlete, you work more as partners with the medical staff and the coaching team, as let's work together to get the best out of me. So maybe there's something in there where he wants to follow a specific treatment pattern. I know you raised in our morning call the concept of him not really having a pre-season, given he played in the Champions League, and most Champions League clubs, at least in the Premier League, had a delayed start to the season. He wasn't afforded that luxury. So maybe they had a kind of discussion when he joined that we will delay your pre-season. You essentially start with us post-international break and beyond. I do, as my colleague Inspector Morse up there, I'm not digging through the training photos. And there's also the off chance that he has to wear something specific in training. They don't want it photographed, that they don't want rumors and just to be asked about it a lot in terms of Ox being pictured and stuff like that. There's all kinds of things that could be going on there. I'm not so sure. I think more than likely he just wants to do his own thing. They've built some regime where once he's comfortable, he'll integrate back into the side, but he's more than capable and used to training on his own.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point, Joel, isn't it? The concept of him not having a pre-season and knowing how sort of back-ended the fixtures are going to be from sort of now on in, especially till March. Is it possible that Liverpool are playing this a bit cute? Are they holding a nerve with him a little bit and saying, well, if we sort of put the effort and time into sort of getting him to where we want him now, then Christmas onwards, we're hopeful that he's going to be in a place where injuries aren't a big issue with him. I'm not sure. What do you think?
It's possible. I wouldn't write it off as a theory. I think what would confuse me about that is that they were so ready to just chuck him in straight away. He was the first sub off the bench at Chelsea away when Henderson came off injured at half time, and I think he'd been at the club for 2 or 3 days at that point. He'd literally just done his unveiling, probably had one training session, I think, a light training session, and gone straight into one of the biggest games of the season. Yes, it was against 10 men, but it's still Chelsea away. You don't chuck a player in like that if you don't think they're ready physically. Is a huge risk. They've done all the assessments when they signed him about whether they could do that, so they obviously felt they could. And then again, when he came back from his isolation period, obviously had the virus, and then they put him straight in for the derby. He didn't have to do that either. They could have kind of waited and bedded him in over this period in so-called easier games against Sheffield United or Midtjylland or West Ham, but they put him straight in for Everton away. So if they were now taking the stance that he needs to have an extended pre-season, then that would seem to fly in the face of chucking him straight into 2 of the biggest games in the early stages.
The worst case scenario is the Shaqiri thing of last season, where they just stay silent the whole time. I think that Shaqiri, it was so in the background because he's Shaqiri and he wasn't a vital member of the first 11 and they were doing so well that I don't think they'd be able to kind of just push it and prod it out of public view. I mean, we're doing a podcast now. We would do another one in a fortnight and another one in a couple of months if this rumbled along. But that is the worst case scenario, that there's something that we don't know about, that the injury was worse than suspected, or something happened subsequently post-injury, and they just want to do it away from public view.
Yeah, it's very plausible. I mean, I think it's interesting, Ollie, that there's been 2 pieces on our site this week, none of which written by us or by Mark, the staff writers, alluding to the fact that he could actually help massively in terms of the fullbacks, and whether or not Liverpool are missing both Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andy Robertson on Sunday remains to be seen. However, there has been pieces from Josh Williams and Andrew Beasley who've alluded to the fact that Thiago's ability to move the ball quicker to the front 3 is something that could be massive against Leicester in that sense. I mean, whatever's going on behind the scenes, it's imperative now that they have him at least available for selection in terms of an option in how they now compensate for injuries and losses in other areas, surely.
Yeah, I think you need one of either him or Naby Keita at his best. That's your 2 solutions, and the degree of variance on Naby Keita means that's just not a reliable solution to go in and feel confident that he's going to be at the apex of Naby Keita powers. You just need someone, as they say in the modern parlance, is progressive, right? Progressive passing, progressive dribbles and things like that. It's just someone who can beat 2 lines of press at once, either by dribbling them, playing a pass, or by playing a direct ball, which is what Robertson and Trent give you at world-class levels, and what Thiago has proven to be over time the best player in the world that's sitting in the middle and doing one of those 2 things, either beat the first line and flip it outside, or just drill a pass through a couple of lines of the press yourself. So they need someone who can do that, and Jordan Henderson gives you a decent amount of that too, in fairness. And I think Naby Keita gives you more of the on the move progressiveness that you would really want, that you get from Robertson, that you get from Trent. That's kind of what you're trying to jigsaw together once you've ripped 1 or 2 of them out of the lineup. So I think it's about as neat and must as possible. If you're going to lose both of them, then you need, like I said, either Thiago at just his regular level, or Naby to be playing a kind of top form.
Yeah, I think it's, if they can get him on the pitch Sunday, Joel, it's imperative for me. I think that the manner in which the game's gonna flow and progress, I think it's going to be a really sort of alien performance in terms of what we're used to with Liverpool. I don't think it's going to be a standard, sort of method in which they attack in a conventional sense. If they haven't got both fullbacks, you forget that Leicester lost both their fullback options, and at the minute they've played, in the last couple of games they played a back three that consists of, Justin James. Is it Justin James or James Justin?
James Justin, that's the one.
James Justin, there you go. Apologies to him. Johnny Evans and some other guy who completely evades me thinking. Yeah, it's someone like that. So
Fofana, he's injured as well for Fofana now.
Is he?
Yeah, well, Christian Fuchs. That's
the legend that is.
The legend that is, who everyone thought had probably retired from football by now. But we often think of this as Liverpool having the world's worst problems when we can look at the opposition and say, throw Kasper Schmeichel into the equation, who went off in the international break with an injury. Then there's a possibility that Leicester are looking at their own team when the team sheet comes in on Sunday and thinking, we're not sure we fancy this.
Yeah, I can't remember the last time Liverpool played a league or Champions League match of any kind of real importance without both the fullbacks at the same time. Obviously, we played several without one of them, but both is a completely different proposition. I'm still not entirely convinced that Robertson's actually injured. We don't have any inside information on that. I have a feeling, given he played 120 minutes in Scotland's game against Serbia, which was obviously their most important one, and I think he mentioned on his post-match interview that he was feeling some tightness in his hamstring. I do wonder if Klopp was just on the phone straight away saying, you're not playing him in either of these next two games, get him back now. So hopefully that is the case, in which case it's just a right back question to address, which is, we've talked about, it's you either go for experience in Milner or Nico Williams, who's not been used at all really this season. I do think you're right in terms of the midfield suddenly becomes a lot more important now, also because of the centre-back situation. I think we all hope that it's going to be Fabinho and Matip, but Fabinho's just coming back from a hamstring injury. Matip, as we know, picks up knocks every other game pretty much in the past. So I think one of the things Liverpool can do to try and compensate for all that kind of makeshift back four is to have as much control and experience in midfield as possible. So having someone like Thiago there, the idea of him alongside Henderson and Wijnaldum gives me a lot of comfort at the moment. If there is kind of disruption throughout the side, you've got a little bit of everything there in terms of defensive attributes, creativity, as Ollie says, both passing and dribbling. You've got leadership, you've got experience in abundance. So I would love to see him back in time for Leicester, but you're right to reference that as much as we're all kind of stuck in a Liverpool bubble of seemingly a new injury or illness-related absence every day, our teams, and particularly Leicester, do have their own. And even with the absences that Liverpool do have, they're still going to be able to field what is a strong team. You're looking at a front three, which is probably going to be Mane, Jota, Firmino. It's not the worst place to be in at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, just sort of to move on to the fixtures slightly, Ollie. I mean, we did a collab piece, didn't we, on Monday around the next 8 games and how many points, therefore, is deemed acceptable in many senses for Liverpool over that time period. 24 points are available in the league, and the majority of responses on that was around the 20 mark, which is what I put, and I think that's fair, to be honest. Personally, I think what will be interesting for me is sort of where Klopp and his team put the chips, and I wonder whether there's sort of big circles around games like Wolves, games like Spurs, games like Leicester. And I think what that means then is there's a good possibility you see something mad for the likes of Brighton away. Really, really sort of out there.
I think that what you circle is those 3, and then you've got your 2 Champions League games where you can just do whatever you want, basically, at this point. It makes the Atalanta game that bit more important, the manner of the victory, the goal difference, basically assuring yourself a qualification. You can throw everything out and then make it up on the back end if need be in the final group game. I think one thing that, as Joel referenced there in terms of Leicester's injuries, that as we go through this month and we're looking at Liverpool's injury crisis, if you want to call it that, with kind of the muscle strains and does the hamstring go, everybody's going to get some of these. You're going to get to Spurs and you don't know what they're going to have because they're going for a similar amount of volume of games. Everyone is playing a silly amount unless they change this 5 substitutes rule. Then everybody's going to go through a spell where they get 3 people in the same position group go down at one time. That's just the way it's going to be this season. And Liverpool happens to have been concentrated defensively and happens to be concentrated over this month. I think that this Leicester game is so big because it will give you such a margin of error when you look at the other games, and you have a chance against this Leicester team where once you start going through their injury record, I mean, there's nothing worse you could lose against Liverpool's side than your 2 fullbacks. That's the worst thing possible, particularly when you've moved to a back 5 and you're trying to hit people on the break and you're asking Wilfred Ndidi, who's also out, to cover all that ground in the middle. You can only kind of defend one or two ways. It's either your fullbacks out or you let the guy in the middle cover a bunch of space, and those two things are not there for Brendan Rodgers. So how he tries to cobble together something for this weekend is a major ask, whether it's Salah, Jota, Firmino, Mane, whoever. So I think there's so much importance on this Leicester game, both for setting the tone, and once you've got those 3 points on the mark and like on the board, and like you said, 20 is fine. I went very negative on my prediction, but I think 18 to 20 is absolutely fine. And you get to New Year and you're right there near the top of the table with hopefully Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain back, hopefully Keita's fully fit, Thiago fully fit, Henderson, Robertson, Trent will be back. And you kind of know where you stand as you head into the January transfer window. Maybe you can find a defender somewhere and all of a sudden you look pretty set.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think the point, Joel, needs to be made that Leicester is huge in terms of if you can win that, and maybe if you can get qualified against Atalanta on Wednesday, then that's a massive breathing space. Like you look at it, there's at least a bit of wiggle room then for every fixture, barring Wolves, I'd say, up to Tottenham, which is on the 16th of December. So if you go to Brighton and it's a little bit mad, you sort of roll the dice with that, and we know Pep's willing to do that. We know he's got the bottle to do that. Ajax can be a nothing game if we're qualified. Wolves at home is where, again, you'd probably say you're gearing your players who have got question marks over them to be fit for that game. Midtjylland, Fulham, and then Spurs. I mean, it would work nicely for Liverpool if the chips fall right.
Yeah, I think quietly these next 2 games back to back, if you view Leicester and Atalanta as a package, are massive. Because Atalanta's a funny one. On the face of it, Liverpool are, if not already qualified, pretty much there. They probably need 1 or 2 more points. Definitely 1 win does it. So on that basis, you almost think, right, we don't need to go big in midweek to get the win. But I almost would quite like to see them do that and just get it done. They'd probably win the group, to be honest, if they beat Atalanta. And then, like you said, you have got 2 complete dead rubbers who you could play literally whoever you want and put all your eggs in the league basket for the next month and a bit up until the new year. I think the other thing as well we've got to consider Liverpool's run here. I mean, when we did our points predictions, I went quite conservative. I think I went 18 points out of 24. I think 5 wins and 3 draws, or 6 wins and a couple of defeats, but you'd obviously prefer the former. If you get the Leicester one out the way first, that is on paper at the moment, other than Spurs, it is the hardest one. But the other thing as well, if you look at the table, I think Spurs are the team that all of us are looking at right now as the one who's interesting. I would put it that way. I'm not fully on board with them as title challengers yet, but they have got momentum. They've got 2 of the league's kind of most in-form attackers. They're scoring goals, and you just feel like Mourinho in a mad, broken up season like this has got a bit of a formula. But I was just looking now relative to us, Spurs' fixtures. I'll read them out over this next period. They've got City at home this weekend. Then they've got Chelsea away, Arsenal at home, Crystal Palace away, Liverpool at Anfield, Leicester at home, and then Wolves away. Nailed on win, other than maybe Palace away. But other than that, you could literally see them dropping points. They won't drop points in every game, but there's 5 or 6 games that they could easily draw or lose there. So this is why I think, because we've all got into a mentality over the last couple of years where we just expect Liverpool to win pretty much every game of the season. It just isn't like that this season. We've seen that already. I think even if they do kind of get closer to Ollie's projection of 15 points, given the fixture that other teams have got and the inconsistency, I would be stunned if Liverpool weren't either top or kind of within 1 or 2 points of top by New Year, if that's the case.
Yeah, I'm not having they don't get injuries either in that point. They're going to, even coming up to the game against Liverpool, I'd be surprised if they haven't got 1 or 2. I mean, I have a theory about Spurs in that they were so bad against Everton and they were so unfit against Everton on the first game of the season. I wonder whether he sort of banked on getting them fit through games and basically forgone any kind of real pre-season with them, even in the short space of time that he had. And I wonder whether they're sort of reaping the benefits for that now. But with the games coming as quick as they are, I don't care who you are or what preparation you've had, there's going to be injuries across the board. It's just that when it's Liverpool, it's obviously mentioned more and highlighted more. But, you know, no one's talking about Leicester, for example. And we've already just highlighted just how sort of in the mire they are. So, yeah, with all of these, Chelsea had another one. They're going to have injuries just like we are. And it'll be a fact of this season. It'll play a massive part.
I think that Spurs game becomes so important based on I didn't realize their fixture list was that stacked over the next month in that time frame. It almost becomes a death shot because you can see them dropping easily three games there quite comfortably. And so if you beat them at Anfield there and they're 9 points behind you or 8 points behind, I mean that's almost a wrap going into the new year, and you're basically looking at Chelsea and City. So it takes on a lot more importance. I actually do think I understand what you're saying about Wednesday night trying to get it done as quickly as possible. I think you could be comfortable and rotating the Atalanta game and just kind of map out the next couple of weeks more so. And then you always have that Midtjylland game. You know, you can always bring everyone back in if you want to for that Midtjylland game. I know it becomes a risky proposition that maybe you have a weird night and it doesn't go your way and it'd be embarrassing, but you would have confidence. You put the full 11 out there, be pretty comfortable. So I think what they have is they have options. You know, they can kind of start mapping this together however they want, and not having international football on the horizon for 4 months means that they can now sit and plan out their best case scenario for the next 4 months and then have alternatives based on the Champions League and based on, hey, if we get an injury here, how do we want to map things out with Nat Phillips, Matip, Reece Williams? The key thing is they have options. Now they have time to actually pre-plan. They don't have a weird international break that's just going to throw up new challenges for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we'll move it on slightly. We we gave you some new content on Liverpool.com this week where we trialled opinion pieces from our writers, and the way in which we've done it is that they follow a certain thread. So on Monday, Mark Wakefield wrote about whether Liverpool should have replaced Dejan Lovren in the summer window. He argued they should. I followed on with that yesterday in a piece about certain types of centre-backs that Liverpool will be looking to sign. So check those out if you can. But gents, I just want to touch on this general topic. Joel, I'll start with you. I mean, Liverpool and a centre-back now seems inevitable in terms of them going and buying one. I think it shouldn't be as given as some people are making out in terms of you just go and get the best centre-back you can in January. And that's regardless of age, stature, attributes, wages. We know how methodical Liverpool and Michael Edwards are. They clearly had a plan for this summer with a centre-back in mind. Now, whether or not, I think the question is more whether or not they hold the breath until the summer, or they try and make something happen early, or they change tack completely and go for a different target. All of that feels very sort of, not un-Liverpool-like, to be honest, in its approach. But I'm not sure that just go and sign someone is the way in which the club will be thinking about this particular issue right now.
Yeah, I mean, on the last summer, I almost feel hypocritical saying they really should have gone and got one, because if I could have chosen one more signing for Liverpool to make in the summer, it would have been a centre-back. But I didn't see it as a really urgent thing at that point, because I know in hindsight now it looks like a real mistake. But back then you're looking at Van Dijk, who basically just didn't ever get injured. So you're seeing as him as kind of one you can rely on. Gomez was pretty injury-free last season, if I remember correctly. But I know he's had his knocks in the past, or he's had serious injuries mostly in the past. But you kind of could rely on his fitness to a degree. You had Fabinho as cover, Matip as extra cover. A lot of the reasoning that we were all speaking about bringing Thiago in was so that you could free up Fabinho to play that role if you needed him to. And you could never legislate for losing your first two centre-backs to knee injuries as serious as Van Dijk and Gomez have had. And I know now that that's happened, it's really easy to look back at those few months and say, oh, why didn't Liverpool kind of plan ahead and buy a centre-back? But that was just a freakish occurrence of two events that you could never have foreseen coming. So I don't think it was a huge mistake. It was a risk, obviously. In terms of what they do in January, I think what we know about Liverpool's recruitment is that they tend to work kind of several windows in advance. So they will have had, all the analytics guys would have had a list of centre-backs that at some point, probably next summer, they were planning to go for, ranked in order of kind of priority and suitability. personally, I don't even see it as a choice, really. I do think it is kind of a necessity. They try and bring that forward. I think what you're talking about in terms of whether they can do that or not, and whether they compromise is tricky. So say they do have a name, for example, if it is Upamecano or Konate, one of the French guys from Leipzig, if they have pinpointed one of them as their kind of summer target, and they try and get them in January, and Leipzig say no, or they want 30 million extra because they know Liverpool are desperate for a centre-back, then it becomes difficult because, like you said, Liverpool don't tend to compromise. They waited another 6 months of Van Dijk after screwing it up first time round to go back and get him. So they don't just tend to go for kind of stopgap solutions really anymore. And I think what is important about this next centre-back is it needs to be one who's going to be a regular starter, or at least at the level where they can challenge to be a regular starter for the next 3-4 years, not just someone who can do a job for the rest of the season, because then what happens in the summer? So yeah, in summary, I would like to see them go for whoever they were going to sign in the summer in January. But I understand in terms of the complications financially, Liverpool are in such a weak bargaining position now because the whole world knows that it's an absolute urgent situation. So we'll have to wait and see.
Can you see a world, Ollie, where they go back in for another Ray Clavan, for example, or this team, this club almost moved on from that type of sign? I mean, there's no chance they do a Colker-like sign. Let's have that right. That's not going to happen now. But someone of the ilk of a Clavan, maybe, do you think they just pull that trigger if they find it? But as well, again, it's back to, as Joel's alluded to and as I alluded to, I'm not sure the whole Alaba profile of player is someone that they'll consider for centre-back. I think that to try and clone someone like Joe Gomez, similar age profile, similar trajectory, if they can find him, and we all know that this club are very good at keeping that under the hat. I think they're far more likely to do that, just going and the equivalent now that they've sold Ian Lovren.
Yeah, I think that would be an A option. It's obviously finding the guy who's on the precipice of the peak of their career. That's number one option. And then your secondary option would probably be to that secondary age profile of the 27, 28 right there now, the Alaba, maybe a bit more expensive than you'd like to pay. And then the C option would be the older guy who you get on the cheap because that club is in financial difficulty, you guys are not getting gate receipts or whatever that is. I think, honestly, you need two. I think one is a necessity, and then ideally you get a second one. And you cobble it together from that group however you want, whether it's the first and the second or the second and the third. I just think it's mightily important to get a body. And I think what's different now, where we need to maybe change our understanding a little bit, is the methodology is different these days. They're not building to something anymore. So you can't be delaying 6 months, 18 months for a transfer window when the age group of this squad now is to win this year, next year, maybe the year after in terms of league titles, European Cups with this group. They're going to age out, and you will need the next guys through, which is why this one is so important. It's not my money, so I'd be happy to pay a £30 million premium on Meccano. Let's go. Let's call AXA. They got any money under the sofa left? let's get it done this year, and we'll have some nice shiny shirts taken for the training ground. So I think it's essential, and I think that they should, just as a long-term business investment, if you have to pay a £10 million premium this year to defend the Premier League title, which is basically what you would be doing, then that to me seems like a great trade-off. So I think getting the 8 candidate through the door in January, and we've talked about this before, I think you have to have it done in December. You can't even wait till January and push the thing back towards February, where your bargaining position gets less and less. You put it out now. We're moving our summer money to now. And you do what they did with Jamal Lewis and they did with Kostas Tsimikas. We have 45 million quid and we're paying it in, £10 million installments, so we'll give you 15 now. Who wants it? These are the 3 players we're after. Who's having it? And you put the pressure onto the other clubs who are struggling financially. Everyone is having a difficult time with the ongoing pandemic. No one knows when they're going to have fans back. And you put the decision into their hands. This is our pot of cash. These are the 3 guys we like. Who wants to take it? And let them bid against themselves to get it done. Ideally, at some point by mid-December, like they did with Van Dijk, like they did with Minamino, so the guy can be up and running by January. But I think whichever bracket it falls into, one is essential. And if you can find the second one, be it a younger developmental player or an older guy, you can just chuck into a couple of Premier League games. I think that's the path.
I think just to add to one more point on that is, I think we're almost at the point now with Matip where you can't we know how good his quality is, but you can't actually depend on him as a genuine option for the rest of the season purely on a fitness record. It's a bonus if we do have him, but all you have to do is look at a scenario within the next couple of weeks or within the next couple of months, Matip breaks down again, whether he's out for a few weeks or a few months, and you're literally left with Fabinho playing, which is out of position, but he's comfortable enough there with one of Nat Phillips or Reece Williams. And if you get to the Champions League quarterfinals, semi-finals, and Liverpool are in a title run in, which we expect them to be, and you're relying on two guys, and this is not to disrespect how well they've done so far because they have stepped in brilliantly, but those two guys to be playing in the late stages of the Champions League and in the kind of the crucial pressure point of the Premier League title race, I just think is unfair on them more than anything else. And I think you've almost got to see Matip as a bonus if you do have him. But I completely agree with Ollie. I don't think it's kind of a debate really. I think they need to get at least one and one very good one.
I think it's also a question for me as well of what type of centre back do we want? You know, we need to sort of strip this down into attributes. Now, there's going to be a Liverpool identity that takes shape over a certain period of time without Virgil van Dijk, and we're very much in the infancy of that. But for me, you know, I think that what are we asking for in a centre-back? Are we asking for a centre-back who wins his one-on-ones? Well, Fabinho looks like one of the best in the league at that when he's played there. Are we asking for a centre-back who just heads the ball away from crosses from deep? Well, Nat Phillips, let's just throw him in because, you know, he seems sort of 8 out of 10 from dealing with winning headers. It's not that simple, but I think just sort of the concept of a centre-back needs to be looked into more. What is it that Liverpool actually need right now? Because if you're saying, well, we need to replicate Van Dijk, well, that's really hard to go out and get, and it's really unfair on anyone that you bring in because you're not going to get that. You're not going to get it. And I wonder whether this management team, back the information that they're giving out in each game. So whatever team they're putting out, they back the information that they're giving them is enough for them to compute, take that on board, and to do the job that's being asked of them. And whether they just think we can cover enough attributes with what we've got, pending it doesn't get any worse. And I think that's the big question in this. If this gets worse, then they're going to have to be forced into something. And I think they'll probably own that. I think they'll probably say, yeah, we couldn't do anything else other than go and do this piece of business because we literally don't have the bodies. But I think they made a conscious decision in the summer not to replace Dejan Lovren because I think that they trust the information that they've bestowed on this group of players to whatever position it may be in, to adapt to that and to give them what they need in 90 minutes against whoever the opposition is, whether it be Man City or, you know, whether it be Fulham. They will back the players that they've got. So I think it's really interesting what they do. I don't think it's as straightforward as many are making out, and that's the point I tried to make yesterday about Alaba. But then we don't know what this club are doing behind the scenes, and I think we, you know, as three would sort of state that we're happy with that, and we're happy for that to be the case. You know, it's not for us to know, and if they want to surprise us with the centre half equivalent of Diogo Jota, then that's fine with me. Come January, so we want to we'll start to wind the podcast down now very slowly, but I wanted to just touch on the move to the academy. I mean, we've not covered really the move from Melwood. I think the Liverpool Echo, Blood Red, do that a lot better than us in that sense, and they've done it excellently well. And we've left that to them to do. But we are sort of now taking the fallout from the move from Melwood to the academy and some of the things that we're sort of starting to now see. And we just find really interesting. We talked this morning about the fact that Liverpool have created a time capsule vault. Is it a vault? What is it, Joel? Is it?
It's a steel case, I think they described it as.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which has to be giant because the volume of stuff they listed and the size of the stuff they listed, like replica trophies.
Yeah.
You know, this thing's got to be taking up half of Kirby if we investigated how much space it's taking.
Well, yeah, exactly. I'm really interested to know where this lies and what lies in it. But I think it's worth just exploring firstly the move in itself, Ollie, but also, again, this is an example of legacy, and it's an example of a time in history that this manager wants us all to look back on as something unique and something special. And I think the manner in which this group of people are able to club together such a unique working environment is something that might be one of the most underplayed but most defining aspects of this legacy in years to come.
Yeah, and it runs along with the redevelopment of Anfield. When there's been successful periods in the past, they've been essentially false dawns, winning the European Cup and adding Mascherano and adding Alonso, and you've got Alonso and adding Fernando Torres, and you think, here we go, here's the new era. But none of the fundamental stuff from basically what Houllier left changed all that much. Who was the last revolutionary who transformed the club essentially and modernized it. And this is future-proofing the club against Klopp leaving, against an FSG leaving, against these guys who've had it at this period in time, have future-proofed it where they will be a world-class outfit in every sense of the word for the next 10, 25 years. And that will be the legacy, is that they've now vaulted themselves back to the correct level where they should have been in world football, and will be there now for the next 2 decades into the next era when we open that vault up in whatever it is, 50, 70 years. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's also worth noting that the facilities are now, as Oxlade-Chamberlain put it yesterday, fitting of the champions, and Melwood seemed very, very much a cosy place, a place that was seen as a sort of home from the players, and it developed over the years was massive. I remember sort of going there in the early 90s as a child, and it wasn't what it was when they left it, put it that way. So, the modernisation of Melwood shouldn't be underplayed, but this will give everyone the sense that, this is a facility now befitting of Liverpool Football Club. And I really like the personal touches in it. There's the sort of beach volleyball, and there's just the inclusion of sort of every aspect of every walk of life that has come through Liverpool, both in a playing sense and in a staffing sense.
Yeah, you've seen James Milner's got his own door as well. I think it's on the dressing room door.
Secret door,
just called the James Milner door. Yeah, there was all kinds of stuff in there as well, like in there the big indoor training pitch area. The side wall has got a big image of them like arm in arm after the Barcelona game, and you see the legacy of this team kind of shown within it, which is really nice as well. I think in a wider sense, what it shows, and Ollie's right to reference the Anfield expansion as well, but the club from where it was when Klopp first arrived to what it's going to be in 2024 or later when he eventually leaves, off the pitch as well, is going to be completely different. And I think that's something we probably don't reference enough with regards to Klopp, because we focus on trophies and player development and players he's brought through and players he's signed and the results and the records on the pitch. But what we're going to see over these next few years, and this is a massive part of it, which Klopp, from everything you read, and sounds like he's been involved in the whole process. He was the one who kind of drove the initial project happening in the first place and has been involved in various aspects of the design, is that he's been responsible for changing everything, really, kind of modernising Liverpool, not just in terms of creating a brilliant team, but also laying the foundations that we don't want to think about it, but there is going to be a Liverpool beyond Jurgen Klopp at some point, and he's creating that platform so that when that day does eventually come, it's in the best place possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important, and it's been referenced from the beginning, Ollie, the importance of having sort of every aspect of Liverpool Football Club on the one site. Yeah. And that's not to say that the under-9s will mix with the first team or whatever. They're not going to get parents being able to go and watch the 13 train if they want for 20 minutes. That's not going to happen. Obviously, we know that. But there's the concept of that's where Liverpool Football Club is, away from Anfield. And that is sort of, there's not that concept of Melwood being a youth player anymore. It's the concept of Trent Alexander-Arnold feeling like the step up to Melwood is huge, and it's a massive make or break for them. It literally could be as easy as one of Klopp's early stories is he gets to see Ryan Brewster because he gets pulled from the 16s or wherever he's going playing 23s because he's just on the same height and they haven't got enough players. So I think sort of maybe I'm being a bit too flippant about that kind of process, but they will have all of the information that they need about the club that stretches beyond the first team there within the hands, and that's huge, and it's how it should be, really.
Yeah, it's almost amazing to think what they achieved, given how much they've transformed and changed, and how much he's built this in his own image. Like Joel is saying, how keen he was on having everyone on one site, how keen he was on having the indoor facility. I mean, not having an indoor facility in this age, and then also winning a league title and Champions League trophy is kind of astonishing. If you think what kind of advantage it could give you. So I think that bringing everyone under one roof is massive. It's massive for the concept of a team structure. It's massive for the idea of kind of that Cruyffist belief of you all jumping up one training pitch as you go up the age groups, and the natural succession, as you're saying, is to move into the first team. And I think it's almost it's like Liverpool getting back to their perch where they should be, but doing it in almost a humble process, that they went across the world. Melwood was always the place, and everything in Liverpool was very insular. It's how things kind of fell apart in the first place. It's not being willing to go and look outside. And for this, they went to Spurs. There was no compunction about going to Spurs. They went to Salzburg. They said, we want to find the best of the best at every single aspect of this. Who is the best at designing kitchens? We want to speak to them. And we'll put it all into one fantasy land that is built basically in the image of Jurgen Klopp. Because as I mentioned before, Jurgen Klopp will leave the club, like Joel said, but they're indivisible now. That whatever Liverpool Football Club is beyond him will be in the image of what Jurgen Klopp thought it should be. In the same way Liverpool became Shankly's image, and though Bob Paisley was the manager, it was under the image of Bill Shankly. That's how transformational a figure is, and this is kind of like it actualized. Whether it's Pep Linders or Steven Gerrard, or Pep Linders the third in 70 years, and his sons, dictating play in the middle of the pitch, it will be under the auspices of that picture they put up of the Shankly and Klopp thing will be there once Klopp is gone. That's the level that he's achieved at this club, and this is the facility to kind of show it.
Absolutely. Check out our own sort of hidden vaults that we're going to place on Liverpool.com starting today with Joel. Check out all that's on there. It's really good. We've got those opinion threads, as I've said. We've got tons of chat about centre-backs and transfers and injuries and everything. In everything that encompasses the modern day Liverpool right now. But for now, we'll leave it there. Stay with us for the weekend. We'll give you all your Leicester content too. But for now, thank you very much. Thanks to Joel. Thanks to Ollie. And we'll see you all next week.